Hello, my name is Kamin Mohammadi. I'm a writer and broadcaster. And first of all, I'd like to thank very much Mayor Nardella for providing this wonderful platform and for inviting me to be here in this really overwhelmingly splendid venue. I'm very honored. I want to talk to you today about representation and misrepresentation in the media, and how we can combat stereotyping and foster cultural resilience within the diverse ethnic communities in our cities. First, let me tell you a bit about myself. I am Iranian. Now, let me say that in a different way. I am Persian. Now, I wonder what those two words meant to you. Did you perhaps, at the word Iranian, imagine Muslim fundamentalism, wonder if I'm a sort of revolutionary? Or perhaps the word Persian struck you instead as benign, even fluffy? After all, cats and carpets are Persian, while radical Muslim revolutionaries are Iranian, right? Well, actually, that's wrong. Contrary to many people's beliefs, Iran was not called Persia until the revolution of 1979. In fact, Iran was never called Persia at all, apart from by Europeans. Because the word Persia comes from the region of Fars, which gave birth to the kings who established the Persian Empire and were so called by their enemies, the ancient Greeks. Iran, in reality, is a land that combines many ethnicities, of which Persian is one, which all sit under the umbrella of Iran, which means the land of the Aryans, meaning the land of the nobles. It was in the 1930s that the then Shah of Iran formally changed Iran's name on foreign maps from Persia to Iran. So you see, Iranians are just as fluffy and feline as Persians. In fact, there is no difference. But the chasm that has been created between those two words has happened solely by misrepresentation. When I was growing up in London, having escaped the revolution of 1979 as a small child, I too took on the misrepresentations of my birth country, Iran, that existed in my adopted country of Britain, mostly through the media and the stories that they chose to tell. But when, after nearly 20 years away, I first went back to Iran in my 20s, I saw that this repressive, joyless country I'd been led to believe that Iran had become really didn't exist. And from there was born the desire to tell the stories of my country, to correct the misrepresentations that I had grown up with, and also because I came back laden with stories. Everyone that I knew, everyone that I met in Iran entrusted to me their stories, their private stories of pain, of frustration, of repression, of joy, of falling in love. I came back with these stories hidden like precious jewels in my pocket, and I needed to share them. I was already a journalist and a travel writer, so it was easier for me than most, perhaps, to find commissions. And yet, with every commission that I got, I was fighting stereotypes and misrepresentations, the prejudices that existed deep in the media about what Iran meant, what a country in the Middle East represents. And these prejudices leaked out of the people who were commissioning me. Let me share with you some of the gems of my experiences, heard in the offices and boardrooms of some of the world's most impartial and balanced media outlets. Things that commissioning editors, all intelligent, informed, liberal people, said to me. One request was, I've heard there's a party scene in Tehran. Can you find me the Tehrani Paris Hilton? Another said, but of course, no one in Iran drinks or has sex before marriage, right? And my favorite, of course, women in Iran can't own property. Now, in this last comment, the bit that surprised me the most was the "of course," said with such certainty by a woman who should have known better. And she should have known better, because not only can women in Iran own property and work and drive, and they can get divorced, but they've also had the vote since 1963, the longest in the region. And yet, in spite of these prejudices that I encountered, I was lucky enough to be able to tell my stories, to have my journalism all based on deeply human narratives published by all the major newspapers and magazines in the UK. I was so lucky that I was even given a book contract to be able to write my story, my family's story, as well as Iran's story, in a longer form than magazine articles allow. So it was only then that it really hit me how important this space that I was lucky enough to be given actually was. When I couldn't find a publisher for my book in the US because, despite various editors really loving the book, they all named 3 previous non-fiction books written by Iranian women and said that the market was saturated. 3 books by 3 very different people telling very different stories. Just 3 books, and there was no space for one more in a country as vast and as populated by different races as the US. And so this is the crux of my plea to you today, why I've spent all of this time telling you my own personal story. In the quest for representation and not misrepresentation, in the quest for fighting the stereotypes that make me, for example, an angry Iranian but a fluffy Persian, then we must make space for all of these stories, for multiple stories to be told, for many voices to be heard. To be able to deconstruct lazy and dangerous stereotypes, we need a multitude of stories told by a multitude of different voices. And we need to be willing to listen to those stories, to challenge our own tendency to turn away from the unfamiliar, the complex, the multifaceted, the other. We need to create the space for those stories to be told, for there lies true cultural resilience, the ability for all the citizens of a city, including the immigrants, to feel that they own their own narratives, that they can all be Iranian as well as Persian. I believe in the power of stories. Facts reduce us, while stories humanize us. They flesh us out for each other. If we allow stories and we listen to them hard enough, perhaps we will hear from those who've lived through the experiences, not just the horrors of war, the devastation of loss, the pain of migration, but maybe we'll also hear the sound of music playing, the peal of laughter, sound of dancing feet, those moments of joy which come through even the most dark times and help to bond us all together as one human race. Storytelling is as fundamental a human need as is drinking and eating and breathing. It is what we have always done since we found a way to draw on the cave walls. Because it is by telling these stories that we understand the world, that we understand each other, that we can empathize with those who seem different to us. Stories close the gap between you and me. Stories bridge the divide between us and them. Stories bring us back to the basic thing that connects us all, that we are all human. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished mayors, the onus, I believe, is on us to make sure, through whatever means and media possible, be it funding for independent media, for independent theatre and films, for independent publishing presses, by establishing ways for social media to connect citizens directly, by including histories other than the dominant in our children's school books, that we create and maintain a space in which people can tell their stories, can own their own narrative, and can share their humanity with each other. Thank you.